The NAACP betrays those it presumes to represent by endorsing counterfeit same-sex marriage. I'm Matt Barber, Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action, and joining me in studio today is Ron Miller, Associate Dean with Liberty's Helms School of Government. Ron, as we know, in recent weeks, President Obama has evolved and come around on the issue of so-called same-sex marriage. His evolution, I think, is more in terms of a political evolution than anything else. He believes it's probably politically expedient at this time to endorse, to fire up his base of leftists, this notion of so-called same-sex marriage. He has done this, the NAACP, on the heels of his endorsement to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, has also endorsed same-sex marriage. This, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ron, in spite of the fact that the vast majority, an overwhelming majority of people in the African-American community recognize the value of natural organic marriage, legitimate marriage, and recognize that the radical redefinition of marriage is not something that is best for their community or for our society at large.
Well, if any demographic in the United States understands the value of having strong families with a mother and a father in the home taking care of children, it's the black community. You have a 72% out-of-wedlock birth rate in the black community. And statistics show that when you have married parents, the incidence of poverty drops by 8%. Only 8% of families in that category are in the poverty level compared to 41% of families where it's a single parent. And so when you look at the impact of not having a mother and a father in these homes, what the NAACP has done has really been a betrayal of their purpose. They're there supposedly for the, quote, advancement of colored people, to use their own title. But this does nothing to advance anything for the black community. When we're suffering from the breakdown of the family, when we're suffering from boys growing up without knowing their fathers and not having positive male role models, mothers having to fill both roles and going out to try and make ends meet, and they're not there for their children. It's just a bad policy move all the way around. And what really makes it even more unseemly is that they didn't do anything on this issue until the president took this step. So it's a blatantly political move. It's also an indication that the NAACP has co-opted itself. It's no longer an independent or so-called nonpartisan organization. And it's just a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Party.
Exactly. And they've come out here and they're giving a cover to President Obama for really, I think, what is turning out to be a blunder on his part. Anybody could have told you, the people oppose this ridiculous oxymoronic notion of, I call it mock marriage. There's no such thing as gay marriage. It defies the definition of marriage. You cannot have gay marriage. Marriage, by definition, is the joining of two things that are different, a man, a woman, in the bonds of matrimony for the purpose of procreation. So it's not, to use the term marriage, it's not even appropriate. I call it mock marriage because it both mocks the institution of marriage and it mocks God. And God will not be mocked, Ron. Well, 32 out of 32 states where the people have had a chance to voice their views on this issue have voted overwhelmingly to defend traditional marriage, natural marriage. Not even close. The numbers, in North Carolina, for instance, recently, 61% to 39%, I think it was, voted to defend natural marriage. African-American community, to give an idea of where they stand on this issue, we need only look to California. Proposition 8, 70% of the African-American community voted to defend natural marriage in the state of California. So the NAACP here, they're doing a couple things. As you pointed out, they're covering Barack Obama here in a partisan way. In the face of where their constituents stand on this issue, they're kind of thumbing their nose at their own constituents here. And secondly, tell me if I'm wrong here, I'm not African American, I'm not a racial minority, but it strikes me that this would be offensive. How dare they demean and undermine, cheapen the genuine, noble civil rights movement and civil rights gains over the years by equating deviant sexual behaviors and people who define their identity based upon those behaviors to civil rights. They're calling this civil rights. This is not about civil rights. This is about wrong behavior, and the NAACP is undermining its own mission by putting a parallel between this notion of so-called newfangled gay rights and genuine civil rights.
You'll find that if you listen to the talk in the black community, there are a lot of people out there who do take offense at that because they believe that the characteristics which led to racial oppression and discrimination that they had to confront were not characteristics under their control. And I know you'll hear this discussions about, I was made this way, I don't have a choice. Well, behavior, regardless of whether you have a tendency toward a certain type of behavior or not, behavior is always a matter of choice because as human beings, we have a soul and a spirit and we have the ability to make choices. And so when you look at the things that happened to black Americans, the imprisonments, the intimidations, the terror that they had to deal with coming up to the 1950s and 1960s, there is no comparison. You can go to countries elsewhere in the world and maybe you'll find some persecution of people for those sexual preferences, but not here.
Yeah.
It's an appalling lack of perspective.
It's very well put. We don't have a history of gay-only water fountains. There isn't a history of whole communities donning white hoods and going out and lynching people because they believe them to be homosexual or. So it really is an offensive comparison. I find it offensive. My friend Pastor Ken Hutcherson in Seattle, Washington, African-American pastor, I think he said it very well. He says, "Don't compare your sin to my skin." And I think that really sums it up. And quickly here, we only have a couple more minutes, but another issue out of this is that this has created a tremendous rift within the African-American community, with the politicos within the African-American community pushing the leftist, postmodern, sexual anarchist agenda, while the African-American community at large overwhelmingly embracing traditional family values. This is a rift. I know about a dozen or more African-American pastors with a number of African-American pastors have come out and asked President Obama to reverse course on this, and this is causing problems. Am I right?
It is absolutely causing problems. I've seen them in social media and other areas too, where you can find these pitched battles going on between people who are so wedded to the notion of having a black president that they have abandoned all pretense of being Christians in the sense that they claim. And frankly, they have made racial identity politics their idol. And that's harsh, but it's true because I honestly believe that if they truly put Christ at the pinnacle of their worldview, then everything else would come from that. And to the extent that they are calling names, I'll give you one example. A friend of mine who is very firmly in support of traditional marriage, and one of the more intelligent and eloquent people I know, has come under vicious attack both in public forums and elsewhere for her stance on traditional marriage. And it's to the point where you can't have opposition without them calling you a sexual bigot or any one of a number of terms which I can't repeat.
Yeah.
And obviously they're angry, and it has caused the black community to take a hard look for the first time as to whether they're putting Christ first or racial identity first.
Well, and we saw after Proposition 8 as well, a number of activists in the homosexual community coming out with racial slurs against the black community for supporting Proposition 8, for supporting traditional marriage. So racism abounds on this issue as well. Well, folks, Liberty Counsel, we are going to defend natural marriage. We are going to defend God's definition of marriage, Christ's express definition of marriage is between one man and one woman. We will fight against the radical redefinition of marriage and anybody who pushes that radical agenda. Go to lc.org to learn how you can become a part of Liberty Counsel's team to defend natural marriage, or call us at 800-671-1776.